On November 17, 2012, a small fiberglass fishing boat left the coast of Mexico from a village called Costa Azul. The boat was about 25 feet long, open to the sky, powered by a single outboard motor. It was designed for day trips, short runs into the Pacific to catch sharks and mahi-mahi, then back to shore by nightfall. 2 men were aboard. The captain was Salvador Alvarenga, a 36-year-old Salvadoran immigrant who had been fishing these waters for years. He was experienced, confident, and familiar with the sea. His crewmate was Ezequiel Córdoba, a 22-year-old local man on only his second deep-sea fishing trip. They planned to be gone for 1 day, maybe 2. They brought enough fuel, water, and food for a short journey. By the afternoon, they had motored about 75 miles offshore. The fishing was good. They worked through the day, pulling in their catch, filling the ice chest. As the sun began to set, Salvador decided to stay out a little longer. A few more hours. A few more fish. That decision would change everything. Somewhere during the night, the weather began to shift. A storm was coming. The storm hit with full force before dawn. Winds exceeded 50 miles per hour. Waves rose to 30 feet or higher. The small open boat was tossed violently in every direction. Salvador and Ezequiel held on. They had no choice. There was no cabin, no cover, no protection from the water that poured over the sides with every wave. The outboard motor, their only means of propulsion, was swamped. Salvador tried to restart it again and again. It would not turn over. The engine was dead. They were now adrift. Salvador radioed for help. He reached his boss on shore, a man named Willie, and gave their approximate position. Willie said he would send help, but the storm was too severe. No rescue boat could launch in those conditions. The Coast Guard could not reach them. Salvador and Ezequiel waited through the night, bailing water constantly to keep the boat from sinking. By morning, the storm had pushed them far from their original position. How far, they did not know. The GPS unit had been destroyed by the water. The radio soon followed. All they had now was the boat, a damaged ice chest, some fishing gear, and each other. The shore was gone. The world was gone. There was only the Pacific. The first days of drifting were chaos. Salvador tried to paddle toward shore, using pieces of wood in his hands. It was useless. The current was too strong. The boat moved only where the Pacific wanted it to go. Ezequiel was terrified. He had never experienced anything like this. He vomited constantly from seasickness and fear. He cried. He prayed. Salvador tried to keep him calm. He told the young man they would be rescued soon. Someone would come. They just had to wait. But no one came. The fish they had caught spoiled quickly in the tropical heat. The ice melted. The fresh water they had brought ran out within the first week. Salvador knew they needed to find new sources of both food and water immediately, or they would die. He began to fish with his hands. He caught small triggerfish that swam near the boat. He caught them and ate them raw. He taught Ezequiel to do the same. The blood and fluids from the fish provided minimal hydration. It was not enough. When it rained, they collected water in the ice chest, in buckets, in their own cupped hands. They drank desperately, knowing the next rain might not come for days. This became their life. Waiting, fishing, drinking rain, surviving. Weeks passed. The boat drifted further and further from the coast of Mexico, pushed by the Pacific's westward currents. Salvador estimated they were moving roughly 20 to 30 miles each day, but toward what, he could not say. There was no land in sight. There had been no land in sight since the storm. The sun was relentless. It burned their skin until it cracked and bled. They had no shade. They had no sunscreen. Salvador fashioned a cover from the remains of their ice chest and some fishing line. It offered minimal relief. The nights brought cold. Their clothes were always wet. They shivered until dawn, then burned again until dusk. Ezequiel grew weaker. He could not keep the raw fish down. He vomited most of what he ate. His body was consuming itself. Salvador tried everything. He caught turtles that swam near the boat. He killed them with his bare hands, breaking their shells against the hull. The turtle blood was easier to drink than fish blood. The meat was easier to digest. He fed Ezequiel first, always Ezequiel first. But the young man was fading. His eyes grew hollow. His speech slowed. He began to talk about death as if it were a friend waiting to meet him. Ezequiel Córdoba died sometime around the 4th month. Salvador could not remember the exact day. Time had lost meaning. Days blurred together in an endless cycle of sun, salt, thirst, and hunger. What he remembered was the final conversation. Ezequiel had stopped eating entirely. He refused the fish. He refused the turtle blood. He refused the rainwater. He said he was ready. He said he wanted to go. Salvador begged him to hold on. He shouted at him. He pleaded. But Ezequiel had made his choice. He lay down in the bottom of the boat, closed his eyes, and stopped responding. Salvador held him as he died. Then he was alone. The body remained on the boat for days. Salvador could not bring himself to push it overboard. He talked to Ezequiel as if he were still alive. He apologized for not saving him. He promised to tell his family what happened. Eventually, he knew he had to let go. He slid the body into the Pacific and watched it sink beneath the surface. The ocean swallowed his only companion without a sound. Salvador Alvarenga was now completely alone on a 25-foot boat in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth. The nearest land was thousands of miles away, and no one knew he was still alive. The months that followed were a blur of routine and madness. Salvador developed systems to survive. He caught fish every day, triggerfish, small sharks, mahi-mahi when he was lucky. He caught turtles whenever they swam near. He caught birds that landed on the boat to rest. He ate everything raw. He drank turtle blood and rainwater. When there was no rain, he drank nothing. He waited. He learned to read the sky for coming storms. He learned to position the boat to collect maximum rainwater. He learned which fish were safe to eat and which would make him sick. His body adapted. His skin became leather. His hair grew long and matted with salt. His beard grew wild. He lost track of weight, but he could feel his bones through his skin. He talked to himself constantly. He recited the names of everyone he had ever known. His mother, his father, his daughter back in El Salvador. He sang songs from his childhood. He prayed. He screamed into the empty ocean. Anything to fill the silence. Ships passed in the distance. He saw them. He waved. He screamed. None of them stopped. None of them saw him. The Pacific was too big. The boat was too small. He was invisible. Salvador lost count of the days. He tried to mark them at first, scratching lines into the boat with a piece of metal. But after a while, it seemed pointless. The days did not matter. Only the next meal mattered. Only the next rain mattered. He estimated time by the moon cycles. He watched it wax and wane, month after month after month. He guessed he had been adrift for nearly a year when the jellyfish arrived. Millions of them. They surrounded the boat in a glowing mass that stretched to the horizon. He could not fish. He could not reach into the water without being stung. For days he waited, starving, until the swarm finally passed. He survived. He always survived. There were moments when he considered giving up. He thought about Ezequiel. He thought about how easy it would be to simply stop, to slide into the water and let the Pacific take him. But something kept him going. His daughter. Her name was Fatima. He had not seen her in years. He had left El Salvador when she was a baby, sending money home when he could. He did not know if she remembered him. He did not know if she knew he was alive, but he decided that he would see her again. No matter what, he would survive. On January 30th, 2014, after 438 days adrift, Salvador Alvarenga saw land. At first he did not believe it. He had seen mirages before. islands that shimmered on the horizon and then dissolved into nothing. But this one did not disappear. It grew larger. It had trees. It had a beach. It was real. He had drifted nearly 6,700 miles across the Pacific Ocean, from Mexico to the Marshall Islands, a chain of tiny atolls in the middle of nowhere. The boat washed up on the reef of Ibon Atoll, one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. Population, approximately 700 people. Salvador could barely walk. His legs had atrophied from over a year of sitting and lying in the small boat. His muscles had wasted away. His body was skeletal. But he was alive. He crawled from the boat onto the reef. The coral cut his hands and knees. He did not care. He reached the beach and lay there, breathing, feeling solid ground beneath him for the first time in 438 days. Eventually, he stood. He stumbled toward the trees. He found a small house. A local couple, Emmy and Russell Lykedrick, saw a wild-looking man emerging from the jungle. They did not know what to make of him. He did not speak their language. He could barely speak at all, but he was clearly in desperate need of help. Emmy and Russell Lykedrick brought Salvador into their home. They gave him water. They gave him food. They cleaned his wounds. They contacted local authorities. Within hours, the entire atoll knew a stranger had arrived. Word spread to the outer world. A castaway had washed up in the Marshall Islands, claiming to have drifted from Mexico. At first, many were skeptical. No one survives 438 days at sea. It was impossible. Journalists and investigators descended on the tiny island. They questioned Salvador for hours. They examined his boat. They checked currents and weather patterns. They contacted Mexican authorities. Slowly, the story was verified. Salvador Alvarenga was telling the truth. He had been reported missing in November 2012. His boss Willie had filed the report after losing radio contact during the storm. Search parties had looked for him and Ezequiel for days, but found nothing. They had been presumed dead. Now, 14 months later, one of them had returned. Salvador was transferred to a hospital in Majuro, the capital of the Marshall Islands. Doctors examined him carefully. He was severely malnourished, but otherwise remarkably intact. His organs were functioning. His mind was clear. He had survived something that should have killed him many times over. The world wanted to know how. Salvador could only give one answer. He refused to die. Salvador Alvarenga returned to El Salvador in February 2014. He reunited with his family, including his daughter, Fatima, now a teenager. She did not remember him. He had left when she was a baby. But they had time now, time he had earned through 438 days of refusing to surrender. The adjustment to land was not easy. Salvador struggled with crowds, with noise, with the simple act of walking on solid ground. He suffered from nightmares. He saw Ezequiel in his dreams. He heard the young man's voice asking why he could not save him. The guilt stayed with him. It never fully left. The family of Ezequiel Córdoba filed a lawsuit against Salvador, accusing him of surviving by eating their son's body. Salvador denied it. He maintained that he pushed Ezequiel's body into the ocean days after his death, as he had always stated. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed. No evidence was found to support the accusation. Salvador wrote a book about his experience. He gave interviews. He told his story to anyone who would listen. Not for fame, not for money, but because he had promised Ezequiel he would tell people what happened. He kept that promise. Today, Salvador Alvarenga lives quietly in El Salvador. He does not fish anymore. He does not go near the ocean. But he is alive. And somewhere in the vastness of the Pacific, the currents still move. Indifferent, endless. Carrying whatever falls into them toward destinations unknown.